Today I'm going to share more stories about shadow people and further delve into the mystery of what is a shadow person. Hey, that was good. Shadow people are very interesting to me for the reasons that I've had native people tell me that they've seen Bigfoot turn into shadows. Little people look like little shadows running in front of them. So I definitely believe that because of that last story about the native that was stolen by the Kukushkas, how he became a shadow person when he came back. So he's abducted by these creatures and he's brought back to the land of the material world, and everyone sees him as a shadow man. I forgot to add in the last video an important point that I wanted to bring up, and that's the fact that electrically conductive metal seems to be the enemy of the supernatural. Now, I don't actually think it's an enemy to them. I just think that when they travel or when they use shamanism, what we look at as magic, which may actually be super science beyond our understanding, when they use these abilities or this power or this magical transportation that they use to go invisible, it seems to create an electrical field around them. And like the story with the guy kidnapped by the Kukushka, when he touched metal, metal takes away the Kukushka's power, it takes away the shamanic power. So if metal takes away shamanic abilities, that means that shamanic abilities have to do with electrical fields, like a generation of an electrical field around it. I think this is just science that we don't understand. And this would also explain why people who live in the boonies have more supernatural experiences than people who live in cities. Let's think about that for a second. A city is filled with metal. It's filled with wires and electrically conductive materials. The very nature of how a city is set up would make it more difficult for things that generate this electric field to work properly. So they would have to retreat to the forested areas and other places. And with that, here's the first story about a shadow person experience. There have been two circumstances in my life where I was subjected to shadow people. The very first time occurred when I lived overseas in the United Arab Emirates. I was 11 years old and playing with my pet dog. For some reason, my parents were not there. Anyway, I was chasing after Spike around my house, and as I was going through the kitchen, I saw an old Arab sitting at the breakfast table. It happened very quickly and left me questioning if I really saw what I saw. The second event occurred throughout my adolescence when we lived in the Netherlands. I had a man that would visit me at night when I prepared myself for sleep. He was tall and unnaturally slender. He was a shadowy, blurry figure without a face. He was primarily a shadow. However, after a while, I was able to make out that he used a tight-fitting, striped rugby shirt and pants that looked like they were styled from the 40s. No, it wasn't Freddy Krueger, but he did have comparable attire. Scratch the hat and claws. Anyhow, I saw him for over a year. He would stand right at the foot of my bed and look at me. He was often bent over in the far corner of the bedroom, huddling his knees to his chest as if he was stressed out. However, other times he stood in the hallway or by my bedside, bent at the hip at a 90-degree angle, staring directly at me. Lastly, he would sometimes hover about a foot above me, like on the scene of Ghostbusters, however a bit creepier than that. Several times I tried to tackle him. He was standing at the foot of my bed when I gathered my blankets and tried to shock him by abruptly attempting to wrap him up in it. I got within a few inches from his face, almost nose to nose, when he sort of just faded away. After a while, I informed my mom about him and explained to her that he appeared like a shadow, and I told her what he did. The blood drained from her face and she went pale, and she told me that she had seen the very same shadow figure for several years now, and would hide her face in her
in her husband's side whenever she saw him. She also said that her aunt and great auntie had actually seen the shadow person. I believe that to be strange, since I appear to be the only male on my mom's side that had actually seen him. But this has been years earlier, and I no longer see or feel his presence. As I stated before, I have experienced many strange things in my youth, and have resided in a haunted house as well, but I no longer am visited or bothered by such things, although I can still walk into a home and feel that something is wrong about it. I guess the only reoccurring result of all this is that I can feel if somebody comes into the space where I sleep. There have actually been a number of times where I've almost hit my girlfriend out of reflex, but this appears to be happening less and less frequently.
Something I found interesting about this video was the guy in the 1940s rugby shirt. So he was often seen huddled in the corner, kind of like rocking back and forth. That's what I got in my mind when I read it anyway. Like he was stressed out, like freaking out and stressing out about his situation. Like he was a shadow person. He keeps trying to interact with this person that could see him, but there's nothing that he can't communicate. He's kind of screwed. And the kid said that he interacted with them for like a year or something, and then it stopped. Later on in the video, I'm going to share a story about a shadow person encounter with time distortion. It makes me think that when something is in the shadow state, I'm going to start calling it the shadow state. Let's say I coined the term, Kitabito coined the term shadow state. When something enters this parallel dimension where they look like shadow people, I say this rugby guy got trapped there, and for some reason time moves at a different rate when you're there than it does here. So it might have been the 1940s when he was stuck there, but for some reason he moved forward through time more rapidly, so it might have been only a few days for him, and then this kid was able to see him like however many years later. I don't even know what year that story took place, but that was just a thought that went through my mind. I'm not saying for sure that it wasn't a spirit. It just kind of seems like perhaps the reason why so many people see shadow people wearing old-fashioned clothes is because the time distortion. They're moving forward in time at a faster rate, and it might seem old to us, but they might have only been there for a little while. And with that, let's move on to the second shadow person story. Check it out.
I have actually only had experiences with 2 shadow people or creatures while I was growing up. I lived in a home that was 40 years old. The whole time I resided in that house, I couldn't get a good night's sleep. I was able to sleep easier when I was spending the night at a buddy's or relative's house, or like the time I lived with my grandma and slept in the bedroom with her. Every night after everyone had gone to sleep, I would get up to see a man-shaped shadow standing in the front of my closet door. It didn't seem to matter whether the door was open or not. The only visual description I can provide of the man was that he was just darker than the space around him, like a void of light. I felt that he was evil because of a strange, eerie feeling that I got whenever he was around, and I felt like he was watching me. Every night when this occurred, I would summon the nerve to jump out of my bed and the psychological safety of my blankets and run down the hall to my parents' bedroom, where I would jump into their bed, telling them that I had nightmares. I was an extremely introverted child, and it never occurred to me to actually tell my mom and dad what was going on. But this might have been because my parents were engineers and would have sent me straight to a shrink instead of consoling me. When I got to my parents' bedroom, I'd be able to sleep very well. One night, when I was 7, the exact same thing took place, as usual. But when I ran to my mom and dad's bedroom, I found that the door was locked. I shouted and banged at the door in terror. For about an hour, I was banging on the door, while the shadow man was just watching me from the open doorway. Eventually, the shadow person left, and I passed out on the floor near my parents' door. I discovered that in the early morning that my mom and dad had actually decided, without telling me, that I was too old to be sleeping in their bed, and they were going to keep their door locked at nighttime. With me unable to leave the room, the shadow man became more and more active, Rather than just standing in the corner of the room, he would slowly advance towards me. Sometimes he would be standing at the foot of the bed, but more often he would be sitting at the foot of the bed. In some cases, coming right next to me and looking down at me, and a couple of times, rising off the floor, floating from the foot of the bed and hovering directly over me, about a foot or two from the ceiling. He never actually touched me. However, he constantly appeared sinister, mainly because of that creepy feeling I got when he was around. Later on in the year, when I was around 7 years old, I converted to Christianity, was baptized, and started to pray to God and Jesus every night that the man would disappear. However, it did nothing. This might be one of the primary factors that made me convert back to atheism after a couple of years. I tried telling the shadow man to disappear in a firm voice. This likewise did nothing. Another place that made me feel creepy in my house was the bathtub. There was no shower and only a restroom, which was directly on the other side of the wall from my closet. When I was 10 or 11, I asked my parents if anyone had ever died in our house. They said that the realtor had pointed out that an old man died in the bathtub. However, they really didn't care since my parents didn't believe in ghosts. While it would make good sense to think that the shadow guy was the same as the old man who died in the tub, I never got the sense that the shadow guy was a senior, or in fact human in any way. It didn't seem like a thing that had ever been human. It felt ageless, as though it had never actually experienced any feelings besides hostility. My family moved the summer season before I began the 7th grade, and I never saw it ever again. My life relaxed a lot in the supernatural sense, till I was around 16. I was having very difficult teenage years, particularly with my parents, and spent most of my nights at a good friend's house, which my mom and dad didn't mind in the least. One night, I was sitting outside of my buddy's home with her while she smoked a cigarette and bitched about the federal government and justice and other normal teenage topics. Suddenly, we heard a sound behind us and turned to see a little cement sewer cover fly upwards and sewer gush out of the hole. This had to be about 3 feet behind us, and we ran to the middle of the street to avoid the possibility of getting sprayed by sewage coming out of the hole. We agreed that it was strange and went inside. Sometime later, just how much later I can't remember, me and my friend both looked at the front door at the same time. I said, "Somebody's at the door." And my friend got up to look through the peephole, but she said she couldn't see anyone. Both of us could still feel that somebody was there though, so we went to take a look at the entry from the kitchen area window. What I saw was a column of swirling blackness, the very same kind of darkness that the shadow man of my youth was made of. I noticed the horrified look on my friend's face. Her face was blanched and she said, "It's a devil." This statement I attribute to a combination of her Romanian upbringing, really superstitious, and the intense sensation of an evil or creepy feeling originating from the shadowy figure outside the door. The creepy feeling of this swirling darkness was many times stronger than the feeling that I felt from the shadow man that was in my bedroom. My friend then got a huge box of salt from the kitchen and walked around the house arm in arm with me while she poured salt under every door and window. She told me Romanians do this to keep the wicked from crossing them. I guess evil things can't pass through walls. Anyhow, I guess it worked since the thing simply stayed at the entrance all night. We stayed up all night too, just because falling asleep felt like it might be a bad idea. The strange shadowy creature disappeared at dawn, at which point my friend rushed outside for a much-needed cigarette, and I walked home. All of a sudden, home seemed safer than where I was, despite the shadow man that lived there. For half a year after that, everywhere I went, drains and water pipes would explode around me, with the covers being blown off. This usually happened before I got to my destination. Numerous faucets and sprinklers would burst around me, and even one water main. However, that was the last I saw of the shadows. I feel it may be important to mention that I have actually seen a great many ghosts, and they actually constantly appear similar to regular people to me, until I look at them and they suddenly disappear after a few seconds. They've never gave me any creepy feelings or vibes, though sometimes ghosts would startle me. like the time when I was in the bathroom at a friend's house 2 years ago and looked up to see some guy in the entrance watching me pee. I asked my friend if he had ghosts, and he stated that he had a lot, but judging from the part of the house I come from, I had actually just experienced one of the number of male ghosts which like to watch ladies while they're naked or using the bathroom. He said he could never keep a female roommate because of them. I then asked his current female roomie if she had any ghost encounters, in which she replied that she understood that she looked great naked, but she believed it was rude for them to look. Simply put, no ghost I have actually experienced had ever had the tiniest resemblance to a shadow creature. I know that numerous other people believe them to be the same. However, I understand they are not. Shadow people are not ghosts or spirits. They are something else.
What I liked about this story was that they did not think that shadow people were spirits. When they see spirits, it's completely different, and then the shadow people don't really seem human. Like, the author knows the difference between them and doesn't think that the shadow person is a ghost. Again, I go into my hypothesis about the eerie feeling or the evil feeling that people get from a lot of supernatural things. Is it evil? I mean, is it really? Just because it feels creepy does not mean it's evil. I've experienced this creepy feeling myself in astral projection and other paranormal encounters, and it makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It's like a very strange, off-putting feeling. And I talked to my mom, who's a shaman. I talked to her about this eerie feeling. She said it doesn't feel scary to her, but it feels weird, like out of place. And I tend to think that people have knee-jerk reactions to the unknown, and you feel something strange and it doesn't feel right. It feels off. Like, you don't normally feel this kind of thing. And people just jump to the conclusion that it's evil. And I don't really blame people for jumping to the conclusion that it's evil. These shadow things give off this eerie energy. What if that energy is just a byproduct of interdimensional travel? Like, let's say you saw a dogman or a Bigfoot and you feel this really creepy feeling in the woods, and then you encounter this strange creature, and that feeling makes you think, oh my god, it's evil. It has this, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. This doesn't feel right. This thing's evil. And that could just be a reaction based on ignorance. Like, you're not used to the feeling. It's bizarre to you. You're scared because it's strange and it's unknown. You see this giant creature. I don't blame them for thinking that it's evil, but just because it feels creepy and it feels wrong doesn't mean that it is wrong or that it is evil. I think it's a case of knee-jerk reactions to the unknown. And this mentality that people seem to have, humans, which is completely understandable, I get it. I think it's the reason why these creatures avoid us, because we are dangerous. We don't understand something, we feel something strange, we shoot at it, we scream, we run. And that's not a very welcoming, that's not a very peaceful or welcoming way to act. So yeah, I believe that the eerie feeling is just intense electromagnetic, some kind of energy that deals with electrons really strong, that enables them to go through dimensions or enables them to be shadows. Two things that are interesting to me about shadow people. Number one, they are black. So what does black mean? The absence of light. What is light? Electromagnetic frequency. So they're an absence of electromagnetic frequencies. They absorb electromagnetic frequencies. And then what's another thing about them? Often people say that when they touch the area of a shadow person, it's cold. What does that mean? It's absorbing heat. Heat is another form of energy. So it all has to do with energy. Just because it looks dark and just because it's scary looking, because it's black, and we associate darkness with evil, does not mean it's evil. And if you think about it, it makes sense why people associate the dark with evil. Throughout history, if these things need a lack of electromagnetic interference, a lack of light in order to do what they need to do, in order to open holes between worlds, or in order to be in this half here, half not here state, It may be easier to do it during the night because electromagnetic interference interferes with the energy that they need to do it. And so, associating the creepy feeling, dark, shadowy figures, giant looking monster creatures, and that eerie feeling combined makes people think that it is of the devil or evil. But in reality, it's all science. There is reasoning and logic behind why it happens. And the knee-jerk reaction to thinking that stuff or feelings that we don't understand and energies that we don't understand and it looking black is wrong. They're not evil, necessarily evil. And it's not necessarily evil just because it's in the dark. It may just be how the laws of nature, how the laws of shamanism work. And they need specific environmental factors in order to be able to do what they do naturally, like go in between dimensions or whatever. And with that, here's the third and final story about a guy who encountered strange, shadowy people. One of them was actually physical. Check it out.
All right, I got another story. This one's actually quite interesting. This guy seems to have made physical contact with a shadow creature. Hi, my name is Alan. I'm currently 19 years old. I have been researching shadow people stories and still have not discovered any that are similar to my own experiences. It truly boggles my mind that I can't find any similar stories. Anyway, here's my story. I have a couple of stories of these shadowy creatures to share, and they are all very different. I will include as many details as I can. The first time I had an experience was when I was 16. It was about 3:45 a.m. in the early morning. I knew the time because my clock was directly to the left side of my bed. I was watching something on Adult Swim, and the TV show ended, so I decided to go to sleep. I had muted my TV, and I took a look at my clock, which said it was 3:45 a.m. Then I rolled over to lay on my right side. My comforter was half covering my body. I was sleeping in my shorts, and I didn't have a shirt on. The covers were resting at my waist as I rolled over. I was practically asleep because I remember my mind was beginning to roam. All of a sudden, I felt a big hand on my back. The palm of the hand started right above my butt, and the fingers ended right below my neck. I could not decipher the number of fingers it had. However, it had at least 4. Soon after feeling the hand, I turned over, and this thing, it was crazy looking. I couldn't tell you how tall it was because it sort of broke out of its form when I made eye contact with it. Initially, I saw a black thing, but just for a split second. Then, like I stated, its body broke apart and sort of whirled backwards and vanished into a whirling black mist. However, the whirling wasn't like clockwise or counterclockwise. It whirled kind of like tires or gears within themselves, overlapping and such. After I've seen this creature, I just gazed directly at my ceiling, remembering how evil its hand felt. It gave off a very eerie, creepy energy. It didn't feel simply like a hand. It was a hand accompanied by an outrageous, wicked sensation that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. I was completely tense. Being Christian, I couldn't and still can't picture why it took place with me, you know? Evil is the last thing that I desire around me, let alone touching me. This was the last time it ever touched me. The second creature I saw was at my aunt's house when I was 18 years old. My cousin and I had been playing a computer game and watching movies all day. At about 12:30 a.m., we decided to call it a night. They all entered into their different places to sleep, and I was going to sleep in the living room couch. By this time, my auntie and uncle were already asleep. I was smoking a cigarette and watching TV. The lights were all off. The only light was coming from the TV. Sitting down, I had to look over my left shoulder to view the TV. I had to stand up to put my cigarette out on the nearby ashtray. I was stretching over to put it out, then stood back up once again, when at that very moment I felt something in the air, something strange, heavy, and hidden. It wasn't freaking me out too badly. Just the agitation of the air made me feel unsettled. So I laid back down and began browsing the channels, looking for something on the television to enjoy. stopping on a couple channels here and there. By this time, that spooky heaviness in the air went away. I was still flipping through the channels, and I stopped on TBS. I started viewing some Jackie Chan movie. Half an hour into the film, it was now 1:04 a.m. on the dot. The feeling returned, just a little heavier. I tried to ignore it initially and kept watching Jackie Chan kicking some ass. I began to forget about the sensation, getting into the movie and all. Then, beginning at the left side of the television and moving to the right of it, was an extremely dark 3-foot tall creature. It moved from left to right. It moved around in I would estimate to be about an 8.5-foot area. The important thing is I saw no eyes, no arms, no legs, simply pure blackness. At this moment, I was asking myself if what I saw was actually real, thinking I was dreaming, hallucinating, etc. But here's something that makes me think otherwise. When it moved in front of the TV, I couldn't see any light from the television going through it, so it wasn't transparent. It was as if the light got taken in by the darkness itself. It appeared like it was hovering only an inch or more off the floor. By the way, the floor is wooden, and when somebody walks on it, even a chihuahua makes the wood creak. The flooring made absolutely no sound, neither did this creature. I believe it was just walking through, however. As it moved along the path, it randomly disappeared. I rapidly grabbed a cigarette to calm myself down. Then, shortly after, I went to sleep. Never ever seen another one after that, because they moved out of that house. The most recent and last of these events was about 2 weeks ago. This is why I started doing a Google search on these so-called shadow people. I could not call them people just because all of my experiences, they didn't look like people or act like a normal human in any way. So I in turn call them shadow creatures. But this last experience is the primary reason I don't call them shadow people. And you will probably agree with my thoughts if you saw what I saw. This is 3 years after my first experience, and I must say it has to be the worst of all of my experiences. I lived in a different house than that of the first experience, so I never actually thought I would have to deal with this again. I think I must have known, considering I saw one in my aunt's house. This one occurred in the daytime, at 2:56 p.m., and in my bedroom. This experience takes a cake. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it takes a whole damn bake shop. This is without a doubt the strangest thing I've ever heard of. Anyways, back to the story. It was almost 3 p.m. I remained in my room, jamming out to some music. After I was done listening to it, I turned off my radio, grabbed my chair, and began playing on my computer. My window, if I'm taking a look at my screen, is just to the left of me. I got a great view of my backyard. My backyard is simply a small patch of woods, about an acre in total, but I don't own it. All of my neighbors share these woods as their backyard also. But as I'm playing some StarCraft online, I got done blowing the crap out of one of my buddy's bases, and I went to open the window to let some of the cool air in. So the first thing I do while sitting in my chair is look at the window. As I'm doing this, outside at the edge of the forest, I see another shadow creature. However, this one is at least 5 feet tall, not short like all the rest. Even I'm taller than this little bastard. As I'm staring at him, I noticed 2 beady little eyes, not yet distinct in color, because it was too far away at this time. We just stared at each other for about 5 minutes. I even felt my chair and got on my knees by the window to get a better look. From my window, he had to be at least 45 feet away. I didn't feel an uneasy feeling per se, but I saw that it was real and I could definitely feel it. But it wasn't in my room. After 5 minutes of this staring contest passes, due to the fact that I had to look at my watch to see how long it had been going on, I looked back up and he gradually moved closer to the window. At about 15 feet away from my still closed window, I stood up and slowly moved backwards towards my portable torch. The torch wasn't for welding, but rather for burning certain materials, just a cutting tool. I also have a 9mm Beretta semi-auto, but I figured a gun would just go through the damn thing. So I figured I may have a chance of scaring it off with just a burst of fire. I grabbed the torch, still keeping my eyes on the creature. It had moved all the way up to my window. I grabbed the torch, held it in an all set position, but here's the weird part. It didn't just simply move through the window from the outdoors to get in. It completely vanished, then instantly appeared within my room. Now with my window to its back, it began making a growling-like noise. Then I looked down to turn the gas knob on the torch, on. But as I was looking for the knob of the torch, the creature was right in my face. We were now eye to eye. I was stunned. I couldn't light my torch. It wasn't touching me though. It was just glaring at me like a damn maniac. I could see a slight little slit in its mouth, but I couldn't stop looking at those damned eyes. They turned from glowing red to black, simply continuously changing colors, alternating from red to black. But not like a sudden change, more like a fading into one another, like shifting. After I noticed the eyes changing color and glowing, I became frozen in fear. This whole thing started at 3 p.m., remember that. It started growling once again, which frightened me even more. I began hoping and praying that I'd be protected and that it would go away. It remained in my face for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it was about 2 or 3 minutes. And when I say it was in my face, I could have stuck my tongue out and touched it. But I was still so scared that I couldn't even blink. It was as if the creature could see into my soul through my eyes, like it was viewing my memories, like it could read my mind. It then stood back about 6 foot in front of me. Then it just started to roar, so I simply stood there, not knowing what to do. At this time, I didn't want to provoke it with my torch, so I dropped it, fearing for my life. Then it moved to the right, so I turned and faced it once again. It wasn't doing anything but just staring at me, so I collected the courage and strength to punch it. To my surprise, my hand didn't go through it. My fist landed right in between its devilish eyes. The animal groaned and pushed me down without touching me, some sort of unusual psychic force. Then it floated to the ceiling and laughed as I got up. When I did, it came back down and stated these very words to me, which I'll always remember. It said, "You see me, but I see in you. You can't see." Then it disappeared right in front of me. I then started sobbing. Yes, a 19-year-old man sobbing. You would too if this happened to you. I looked at my watch and it said it was 19:23 p.m., which is 7:23. 4 hours and 23 minutes exactly when the creature left my space. But it only seemed like 15 minutes or 20 max. This is the strangest part. I know for a fact that it hadn't been that long. In some strange way, the creature was able to manipulate time, made me move fast forward in time. I still haven't found a story like mine where somebody went forward in time while encountering a shadowy creature. I am totally baffled and confused and puzzled. After that, 2 weeks ago, I'm still extremely uneasy and I keep staying in my house and I hardly ever sleep. I haven't seen anything after that, however, but it was only 2 weeks ago.
Alright, so my thoughts on this video. I'm sorry if some of you don't care about what my thoughts are, but I made this channel to investigate, so I'm going to do it. The shadowy person that went in front of his TV. It absorbed the light from the TV and was like an absence of light. Again, absorbing electromagnetic frequencies, aka light. And if it absorbs light, it stands to reason that light would interfere with its ability to exist in that shadow state. Because if you think about it, if it's absorbing all that energy might interfere with being able to hold that state. Maybe they need darkness in order to travel in the shadow state. Two things that were interesting about it. One is the time distortion. So he went forward in time a few hours. This time distortion talk goes a lot with aliens and the Fae. There's always some kind of time distortion and eerie feeling. You see this recurring thing, a creepy feeling or a wrong feeling, moving forward in time or time freezing. Something to do with the laws of nature and how they're able to go between dimensions and time travel are all interconnected. Like, I know gravity and time are intertwined, but what if gravity, time, and some sort of energy are all linked together? This creature was not see-through. It was not something that you could push through, and its eyes glowed. I have no idea what this creature was. He didn't really give a good description of it. And was this creature evil, or was it just curious? It's hard to say, because although it might have sounded evil, remember, there is cultural differences and language differences. It might have just been saying, like, I could see your thoughts, but you can't read mine, and then just vanish. Maybe it was curious. Maybe it was testing him. It's hard to say. Like, it's scary. It appeared and it went through his wall, and he punched it in the face, and the thing just told him that it could see his thoughts, but he can't see its thoughts, and then it went away. I like to give things the benefit of the doubt. Innocent until proven guilty. A lot of people jump to conclusions that Dogman, little people that look like little devils, shadow people, they think everything in the dark and that looks scary is evil. I personally think nothing was created evil in the universe. I don't think there's like beings that are born to be evil. I think you can become evil, and there's bad, just like there's bad people, there could be bad shadow people, there could be bad Bigfoot that killed and ate humans. There could be bad little people, there could be bad anything. But just because some people have negative experiences with them doesn't mean that's the rule for all of them. A negative experience, like a lot of the Dogman stories that I hear, people feel this creepy feeling, and then the story is basically, it looked at me and I could feel the pure evil from it. Like, it looked at you? Like, oh, that's real criminal. Something just fucking turned its head and looked at you, and you're like, pissing your pants. I get it, it's scary, but that's not really an evil action. Not saying that none of them are evil. There's obviously some scary, dangerous stuff out there, but we should try to keep an open mind and try not to fear the unknown so much, and maybe we can shed some light on the unknown. Here's an example of something that seems evil but isn't. A user recently commented on my YouTube that she was reading a book about someone astral projecting, and this dark figure would jump on him, and he'd be so scared, and he would go back to his body, and it was terrifying, and it was evil, blah, blah, blah. But then he decided to confront his fear, and he went into the astral state. It jumped on him, and he just ignored it, and it just kind of hung out with him, like checking him out, and then just jumped off. Like, ooh, real scary. Stuff that seems scary, stuff that is coming into your room, stuff that just looks at you or just talks to you, might not necessarily be trying to kill you. It might be curious. It might be trying to make first contact. Imagine if you're on Star Trek and you're trying to make contact with a primitive civilization. Your mere presence or merely appearing before them might cause panic and might cause them to attack you. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're so primitive and we're so ignorant that when these strange things from other worlds try to contact us, we freak out, we shoot at them, and we act the fool, and we make them think that we're idiots and we're not ready for them, and they would be right. So try to keep an open mind, try to give them the benefit of the doubt, whatever they are, and try not to have knee-jerk reactions to their presence. Anyway, that was kind of a long rant, but I forgot to say some things in my last video, so I wanted to make sure I cleared them up with you guys. Until next time, people, I got more videos to come. Just stay tuned. This is Kit the V-Talk signing out.